Наміри між Україною, Французькою Республікою та Сполученим Королівством Великої Британії та Північної Ірландії щодо розгортання багатонаціональних сил на підтримку оборони, відбудови та стратегічної стійкості України підписують від України президент України Володимир Зеленський, від Французької Республіки президент Французької Республіки Еммануель Макрон, від Великої Британії прем'єр-міністр Великої Британії Keir Starmer.
Declaration of intent between the French Republic, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and Ukraine relating to the deployment of multinational forces in support of the defense, reconstruction, and strategic sustainability of Ukraine. Signatory for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Sir Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Signatory for the French Republic, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic. Signatory for Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine.
Merci beaucoup. Nous allons procéder maintenant à la conférence de presse.
Вдячні всім. Переходимо до етапу прес-конференції.
Bien. Monsieur le Président, cher Volodymyr, Monsieur le Chancelier, cher Friedrich, Monsieur le Premier ministre, cher Keir, Messieurs les envoyés spéciaux, cher Steve, cher Jared, merci beaucoup pour votre présence aujourd'hui avec nous, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs en vos grades et qualités. Nous avons aujourd'hui tenu à Paris une nouvelle réunion des chefs d'État et de gouvernement des 35 pays qui composent la coalition des volontaires, aux côtés du président Zelensky et en présence d'une délégation américaine conduite par messieurs Witkoff et Kushner. C'est la 15e réunion de la coalition des volontaires que nous tenons depuis le 17 février 2025. Et nous avions aujourd'hui à nos côtés 28 chefs d'État et de gouvernement, le secrétaire général de l'OTAN, la présidente de la Commission européenne et le président du Conseil européen. Cette réunion scelle aujourd'hui une avancée considérable qui est reflétée par la déclaration de Paris des garanties de sécurité robustes pour une paix solide et durable. Cette déclaration de la coalition des volontaires vient pour la première fois reconnaître une convergence opérationnelle entre les 35 pays qui composent la coalition des volontaires, l'Ukraine et les États-Unis d'Amérique, pour bâtir des garanties de sécurité robustes. Cette déclaration détaille chacune des composantes de ces garanties de sécurité. Nous avons eu un rapport qui a été fait par nos chefs d'état-major et par SACEUR, au titre de la coordination américaine. Et nous avons aussi
and also from the side of the Euro-American coordination. And here we have taken due note of the fact that there is a coordination body that will fully coordinate all the competent armed forces and provide coordination between the Coalition of the Willing, United States of America and Ukraine in operational terms that will support the General Staff of the Coalition here in Paris. So within this coalition, on the basis of all the work done in recent months, we have consolidated our approaches Firstly, with the setting up ceasefire monitoring mechanisms to be placed under American leadership, with contributions from several states that said they were willing and able to do so. Then long-term support, firstly to Ukrainian armed forces that are and will remain in the front line of defense and deterrence against aggression. So we will have on a volunteer basis 800,000 men with training, capabilities, and all the necessary resources to ensure that this army can deter any new aggression. Then we'll continue to lay the ground for the creation of a multinational force in the air, on the seas, and on land to provide reassurance after the ceasefire and a long way behind the contact line that was agreed between all the general staff from France to Germany and Poland. I would also like to salute the work done and offered by Turkey in maritime theft. They are willing to take on responsibilities. And fourthly, we have decided to translate into legal terms these commitments to support Ukraine in the event of a new attack by Russia through solidarity and intervention mechanisms. And also, we are continuing to converge around the questions of economic support and corruption. That's the second thing we talked about. But at the same time, we have consolidated the architecture, the planning, the means and the rules for the security guarantee for Ukraine the day after peace is signed, both for Ukraine and the continent of Europe. Part of our discussion was then focusing on Ukraine's future prosperity with the American plan that was presented and the European contributions with a desire to speed up our work alongside Ukraine so that in the next few weeks this prosperity plan can be finalized. It will be a major component of the peace agreements. All of this constitute essential pillars of what will support the negotiations that are underway, and we want, therefore, that to be completed as soon as possible. But these security guarantees are the key to ensuring that never a peace agreement can mean Ukrainian surrender, and never a peace agreement can mean a new threat for Ukraine. And I think what's very important to underscore is all the countries represented here, but also all the countries in the coalition of the willing, and those who attended this meeting following the excellent coordination that we had last year in Berlin. All those actors share the same desire for peace in Ukraine and Europe, but we insisted that this be a fair, lasting and strong peace. And we're all clear in our minds that the peace agreements signed by Russia in the last 15 years have all been broken in Moldova, Georgia and Ukraine. Therefore, based on that experience, we want to have peace and guarantees of peace on the basis of Europe's experience of the last 15 years. This is why the Paris Declaration includes these guarantees and notes the convergence between coalition of the willing, Ukraine and the United States of America. In addition to all this, in the short term, we will continue to provide our support to Ukraine to cope with all the challenges it is facing at the moment in terms of protecting its airspace, protecting civilians who are continually targeted, even as we speak, by the Russians. And we will also continue our work on sanctions to limit and reduce Russia's war effort. So that is what I have to report, thanking my colleagues in Europe and the United States for the progress that has been possible thanks to today's meeting. I'll now hand over to President Zelensky.
Thank you, dear Emmanuel, for your invitation. I would like to thank Chancellor, Prime Minister, as well as the American representatives and all the journalists present. First of all, I would like to thank you for this meeting, which is the most representative. 27 leaders of the European Union, NATO, Australia, New Zealand, Turkey. As a matter of fact, it is a very broad representation, and we are able to sign a document. This is very concrete. There is a declaration, a joint declaration, and there's also this declaration of intent signed by our three countries. And this illustrates the willingness of the coalition and the European countries to work for peace. And we want to be ready so that when diplomacy reaches peace, we can place the forces of the coalition of the willing. The details will be set out in other documents. We're working on which countries are willing to contribute and guarantee security in the air, at sea, and on land. We are assessing which forces are necessary, who will be able to, who shall coordinate all of that. And we also want to work on monitoring and clearly say how this force or that force will be financed, as well as the Ukrainian army. I believe that our Ukrainian forces will be based on the Ukrainian army with other elements. The military from France, the United Kingdom, and others have worked on the necessary military equipment. We also have, we already have enough details, and we know which countries will get involved and what each of them will contribute separately. And allow me to thank every leader who is willing to contribute to this peaceful solution. We also addressed, we had very concrete discussions with the American delegation regarding the monitoring of peace. It's very important for us. What is crucial in this peace deal is anything that can prevent a new Russian aggression. We also made progress with the American representatives who worked on documents in Paris, and we will have other meetings with Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner. We are working on some bilateral agreements, bilateral documents, as well as trilateral documents, and are hoping to sign these soon in different formats. And God willing, we will succeed. We are very grateful for the support of the United States of America, and so that they can provide the necessary support so that Russia cannot aggress Ukraine once again. And we very much agree upon the fact that the guarantees must be based on some legal grounds to be confirmed by the American Congress. Of course, some issues remain open regarding these documents, including the 20-point document. And what we really need to work upon is the issue of territory. We have a number of ideas that could be helpful. And if some issues are not remain blocked between our teams, and the leaders can also get involved. There will be other discussions, and I would like to thank you, Emmanuel, for giving this opportunity, allowing our teams to be able to continue working here for 2 days. And I'd like to thank the American representatives for contributing to it. When it comes to security, the architecture already exists, and our partners can pressure Russia to put an end to this war. Ukraine never stood and never prevented peace. Russia started this aggression, and it is very clear as to who should do what is necessary to be done to put an end to this war. So I would like to thank all of those who contribute to peace. We all understand that we need to stop the aggressor to allow peace. The deep strikes, the sanctions, our diplomacy, all of this is working. Today we also talked about our air defense.
it is essential. Some leaders of the coalition of the willing mentioned it. For us, it is a daily issue. It is true that Ukraine needs missiles every day because, notwithstanding diplomacy, the Russian strikes continue. Russia is not concentrating on diplomacy. They are striking our villages or cities or infrastructure. And we discussed this issue with President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, and I would like to thank him deeply for his understanding and his support. In Paris, the extension of air defense has been discussed already again. The stronger our air defense, the stronger will be our diplomacy. So thank you to all of you for your support. Thank you.
Chancellor, Friedrich, over to you. Thank you, Emmanuel. Ladies and gentlemen, this new year is beginning exactly the way the old one ended. That's to say, with intensive peace diplomacy for Ukraine. And today's meeting of the Coalition of the Willing was a further step on this path towards peace. And so I'd like to start by thanking Emmanuel Macron for his hospitality here in Paris. And also like to thank both Emmanuel and Keir for preparing this meeting today, along with Volodymyr Zelensky. Because, ladies and gentlemen, today, in the triangle of Europeans, Ukraine, and United States, we have built on the progress that we achieved last year in Berlin. This is a shared success, and I'd also like to thank Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the representatives of the United States, and thank them and President Trump for their support in all this effort. We have the same strategic goal. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the weapons in Ukraine, after 4 years of war, be finally silenced. The country is on the verge of a humanitarian energy crisis, and therefore we are stepping up, in any case, our enormous efforts so as to reach a swift conclusion. Secondly, we want there to be a ceasefire, and unlike the Minsk Agreement of 2015, one based on strong security guarantees. And thirdly, as Europeans and Ukrainians, we want to ensure that we can shape this ceasefire together. Today we focused on the contribution that Europe and its partners after a ceasefire could make for Ukraine. As Coalition of the Willing, we will be shouldering our responsibilities. We want to help to make sure that in the future there are strong armed forces in Ukraine that constitute a credible deterrent for Russia through arming, training and funding. We will also take part in the monitoring of a ceasefire, and we will also make a contribution to strengthening Ukraine on land, in the sea and in the air. With our partners in Washington, we agree for that certain conditions have to be met. Firstly, there needs to be strong legally binding security guarantees, including from the USA, and an American backstop to provide security European commitments. I'm very thankful that the United States has already said it would be willing to do so. Secondly, the ceasefire has to be organized in such a way with Russia that the Coalition of the Willing can play an active role. We are actually working towards that. And thirdly, of course, all partners in the coalition have to go through their domestic processes to decide what contribution they will make. Germany will continue to support politically, financially and militarily. That could mean, for example, that after a ceasefire for the Ukraine in a neighboring NATO area, we would have a presence. As for the type and scope of a German contribution, obviously that has to be decided by the German government and parliament once these conditions have been specified and clarified. For me and for the German government, I would say that for the moment, nothing is excluded. As of now, in the 4th year of the war, Germany is Kiev's strongest supporter, and after a ceasefire, Germany will accept responsibility for the security of Ukraine and for the continent as a whole. We also discussed today how after a ceasefire we could promote the reconstruction of Ukraine. We are working on a package for that among European partners in close coordination with the USA. The President of the Commission today explained today how the Commission could contribute to that. And this reconstruction is indissociable from the question of security guarantees. Economic strength will be an indispensable guarantee for ensuring that in the future Ukraine can present a credible deterrent to Russia. So, dear Volodymyr, this also means certain expectations of Ukraine, as we've discussed in Brussels. Ukraine must make sure that its young men can find decent jobs in their own country rather than traveling to Germany, Poland or France. This is something that we have already discussed in Brussels together, and I think that this is an expectation that Ukraine can meet and will meet. So, ladies and gentlemen, no one can say today whether the arms will be silenced in Ukraine in 6 weeks or in 6 months, but we are working tirelessly towards that peace. We'll obviously have to make compromises. We will probably not be able to achieve the ideal of a perfectly designed peace, not as much as we would like, but we have to learn not from books, but from the existing geopolitical circumstances going forward in the next 3 months. We will go about this with perseverance, realism, and a clear view of what is best for Europe. That's to say, a stable ceasefire, strong security guarantees, and peace in Europe, linking Ukrainians and Europeans that we form together. So once again, thank you for this excellent meeting today. It really was worth coming together in such great numbers. Never happened before in the coalition of the willing. We've never had so many people in one room as we had today in Paris, and that shows clearly to Russia that they have to stop the war. There's no point continuing it, and as coalition of the willing, we are willing to work with Ukraine and the US to find a way through to permanent or stable peace in Europe. So all the best for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Aspirationally mean large possibilities for the Ukrainian people, for people coming home from war who will find wonderful jobs out there. We're working with BlackRock, Larry Fink in this endeavor, and we think it's going to be very, very important for the people of Ukraine. And we believe that a robust economy correlates and works directly with these security protocols. It makes Ukraine a strong, independent nation, and we think that's really important in terms of their long-term future. Jared and I are prepared to do anything necessary to work with our European colleagues. Prime Minister Starmer, you've been incredible, as has Chancellor Merz, and all of the European nations who we met today, who we spoke with. It's all been an important meeting today. And we think we've made a lot of progress. We heard President Zelensky and some of the other people here talking about land options. That will be the most critical issue, and and we're going to be continuing on with those discussions, and hopefully we'll be able to meet or come up with certain compromises with regard to that. But I do want to say this. We are here to mediate and help in the peace process, and we're prepared to do anything necessary to get to that place. President Trump strongly, fervently believes that this killing has to stop, that the carnage has to stop. And we're determined, all of us up here, to be a part of that.
Nothing to add. That was perfectly said.
Okay. Thank you.
Nous allons passer aux questions. Il y a one question by delegation. Je vous en prie.
Bonsoir, Claire Gatinois pour Le Monde. Bonsoir, messieurs.
Good evening, Claire Gatinois from Le Monde. Good evening, presidents, prime ministers, heads of state and government, and special envoys. President Macron, this is the 15th time, as you said, that the coalition of the willing has come together to produce security guarantees for Ukraine, hoping for the support of the United States. And now Trump has not firmly committed to American support. After what happened in Venezuela and the threats to Greenland sovereignty, can Europeans still trust our American ally? Don't you think we should think of security guarantees without the United States? And regarding Greenland, in the light of what was said this morning, should we consider deploying European troops to protect that territory and to protect this? Is it because you want to protect links with the United States you haven't condemned the intervention in Venezuela? Thank you. That's a multiple question, and I wish you a Happy New Year. On the question of Venezuela, which I think is not really connected with today's matters, diplomacy has its own roots and ways. French diplomacy has already expressed itself. We have to see that as a coherent message. I think I've been very clear about that. Regarding today's matters, the presence of President Trump's special envoys today and the commitments by President Trump himself, in particular what he said at the meeting in Mar-a-Lago at the end of last year with President Zelensky, that was about an American commitment to take responsibility. This meeting, I think, is a milestone in the process that we defend is in line with the American interests. As what France has been defending for several years is a more independent Europe with more strategic autonomy. That's to say, Europe taking responsibility, greater responsibility for its security, taking into account NATO, but taking on a greater share. In his first mandate and in this one too, President Trump has said that Europeans must bear a greater share of the burden. That's what he's asking us to do, and it makes sense. So all the work of these recent months through the coalition of the willing is to get the Europeans together. But there's also Canada, New Zealand, Japan, United States, and the Canadian Prime Minister in particular was with us today, which is a very strong signal, and is fully committed to these security guarantees. So the coalition of the willing is the beating heart of this support to Ukraine, offering security guarantees. So what we're saying is the day after the ceasefire, this is how we will provide these different moments of support to Ukraine, in particular through a new format for the Ukrainian army that would deter Russia. So in this context, the support and participation of the United States are very important for a lot of countries, many NATO member countries, because American capabilities, sometimes they are the only ones who have the ability to provide certain guarantees. All that is of key importance. Recent weeks have illustrated a change. As Chancellor Merz said in our meeting in Berlin, that was already a milestone with a new step forward. And SACEUR, that's to say the American authorities in charge of military matters in Europe, they were all involved. So there are these different levels of security guarantees where the United States of America have clarified their participation, in particular with respect to monitoring. That's to say, surveillance of the front line, and the American observation capabilities are absolutely vital, and that's been confirmed. So my point is that in recent months we have put together a coherent and meaningful construct. The Americans want us to do more, and we can. We now have a coalition of the willing providing guarantees. We also have American participation through its resources, let's say the backstop. And in that context, the statements by President Trump in Mar-a-Lago, along with President Zelensky at the end of last year, and confirmed by the relevant generals in the chain of command, and as confirmed by Mrs. Kushner and Witkoff, that confirms a guarantee on the part of the Americans. So I have no reason to doubt the sincerity of that commitment, given their statement today and all the work that has been done with the United States in order to design this scheme. And as UN Charter signatory and members of NATO, they are allies to us here in Europe, and it's as such that they are here today, and they have worked alongside us in recent weeks. Thank you.
Could you see that the security guarantees are ready to be put in place? And what about the legal framework? What would be the institutional basis? Would that be an invitation for a multinational force? There's a technical issue. The interpreters can't hear.
Thank you for the question. Firstly, I think that the members of the Coalition of the Willing have to work hand in hand with the United States, and these guarantees have to be legally binding. For the Americans, this means that this has to be supported by the American Congress, and we very much hope that will happen. All the documents are ready for signature, and we hope that will now go through. As for this declaration, the Paris Security Declaration, it paves the way for this process that will be legally binding, because for most of the coalition members, it is necessary to have the support of Parliament, and we count on them for that.
This does not mean that we will make peace, but peace would not be possible without the progress that was made here today, meaning that if Ukraine is going to make a final deal, they have to know that after a deal, they are secure, they have obviously a robust deterrence, and there's real backstops to make sure that this will not happen again. One of the reasons why President Trump is comfortable with where the security guarantees are headed towards is because, based on his assessments and his conversations with President Putin, is that if we can make the right deal, it would mean a deal where both sides look to de-escalate, that there's a real monitoring mechanism, real ability, if there ever is a violation, to have deconfliction and hopefully, de-escalation. And obviously, you create a robust deterrence, peace through strength, where it's unlikely that somebody will ever go and start this again. So this is a really important building block towards an eventual peace deal. And I think that it's a big, big milestone that was reached today between the Europeans with the Coalition of the Willing. And I really want to just thank the DoD and the whole amazing team in the U.S. Obviously, you saw last week the incredible capability of the U.S. military, and that's just a small piece of what they're capable of doing. And so they've been really thinking about this, and they believe that a real peace here is possible, and there are ways to stand behind it.
James Mates, ITV News from London. Mr. Starmer, Prime Minister, today's commitments by the United States are already being called a game changer, and I know there's a reluctance to talk about Greenland today, but what value do these commitments have on the very day that at the highest levels of government in Washington they are talking about seizing the sovereign territory of a fellow NATO member? Mr. Witkoff or Mr. Kushner, if I may ask you, the commitments made today, does President Trump commit to coming to the aid of any European forces deployed in Ukraine were they to come into conflict with Russian forces? Will President Trump have their back? And President Zelensky, if I may ask you, is this enough? You said before today you were 90% of the way towards a peace agreement. How close are you now?
Well, let me start. On the question of Greenland, I've been very clear as to what my position and the position of the UK government is, both in statements I made myself yesterday and in the statement that was put out earlier today. I've been equally clear that the relationship between the UK and the US is one of our closest relationships, particularly on issues on defence, security and intelligence. And we work with the US 24/7 on those issues. So far as today is concerned, the Coalition of the Willing was set up just under a year ago now, with the aim to bring about just and lasting peace, and we knew that that would require security guarantees. We worked on military plans, which were prepared over the early months of the year. To a point of several months ago, we were able to set them out with clarity. Today, we've made real progress on the political commitment, declarations, and commitments that have been made today, the biggest meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in terms of the number of leaders here, and the first meeting of the Coalition where we've been sat together with our American colleagues around the same table, hammering out these issues. So this is the political declaration that goes with it, and we've made some real progress on those security guarantees. They're set out in the documents we've issued, but they include on issues such as working with the US on ceasefire monitoring, on binding commitments to support Ukraine, and on the operations headquarters here in Paris. And as Jared said a moment ago, and I thank Steve and Jared for all the work they've done in recent weeks, particularly on the security guarantees, and for being here today at our meeting. But peace is only possible because of the progress that we're making in these meetings of the Coalition of the Willing and that we've made here today. And I'm really pleased that nearly a year after we begun this work with the Coalition of the Willing, that we've got this far now with security guarantees. Of course, nobody is saying that is job done. Of course, there's more work always to be done, but we've made some real progress today, and that is a good thing for Ukraine. It's a good thing for Europe. It's a good thing for the United Kingdom because, of course, this is about our security, our defence, our freedoms, and the impact that it's already had over 4 long years on Ukraine, on Europe, and back in the United Kingdom.
The President strongly stands behind security protocols. Those security protocols are meant to, A, deter any attacks, any further attacks in Ukraine, and B, if there are any attacks, they're meant to defend, and they will do both. They are as strong as anyone has ever seen. Everyone on this panel, on this stage up here, has acknowledged that, as has almost all of the countries that sat at the table with us today. The President does not back down from his commitments. He is strong for the country of Ukraine and for a peace deal, and we will be there for the Ukrainians in helping them to get to that final peace, and we're confident we will get there. You want to say something, Jared? Perfect.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, we have declaration, and I think this is a huge step forward, because 1 year ago we couldn't even, think about it, and now we have this step. Yes, of course, not enough, not still enough. We will have document which will be supported, I hope, I'm sure, between us, will be supported by European parliaments, and that will be enough. Then we have really very good dialogue with American side, thanks again, Steve and Jared. So we really have good steps forward. Yes, 90%, but we are each day a little bit closer. It's still not enough to have a peace, because enough when the war will finish, will end in Ukraine, we still have losses. So it's still not enough. Thank you very much.
Bonsoir, guten Abend, Bundeskanzler Merz, Michaela Wiegel, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Hier ist von vielen wichtigen Etappen die Rede. Eine wichtige Etappe ist vielleicht auch, dass Deutschland bereit ist, militärisch sich an der Koalition der Willigen
make a military contribution to the coalition. Do you think that's enough to put forces in a neighbouring NATO area? Could you say a bit more about that? There are expectations. You said that Germany is the biggest supporter. So do you think we should up our military contribution? Thank you, Ms. Wiegel, for that question. Yes, we discussed that at length amongst us today. I've said on behalf of the government that, of course, we're willing to participate in the security guarantee. Exactly how? At the moment, that's an open issue, because the whole package as a security guarantee has not yet been fully addressed. We have some very specific proposals available. If Germany is going to be in, that will mean there has to be a decision by the German government, followed by confirmation from the parliament. So I will make proposals to the government and the parliament, perhaps once we have a ceasefire, and when in the coalition of the willing we have a consensus view on how we should proceed. We're moving in that direction. But I said in discussions today that it can be the right thing to do both things. That's to say, to place troops in Ukraine. But that means strengthening Ukrainian troops, first and foremost, but also in a neighboring state, perhaps place further troops that would be available for intervention should there be a fresh Russian aggression. I'm saying if, this is all on the conditional, because the total package has not been negotiated, but the basic premise for all this is a ceasefire agreement with Russia, and that then has to be secured with the appropriate military support to Ukraine. And I want to stress once again, it's not just militarily supporting Ukraine, talking about military support for peace and freedom in Europe, and that is why we are also committing to that. It's not just about the territorial integrity of Ukraine. It's about the lasting maintenance of the political freedom and peace that we have in Europe. We've always protected that, and deterrence has been the case of the last 70 years, and I imagine that will be the case of decades going forward as well. Thank you. That's the end of the press conference. Thank you all very much, and good night. And Happy New Year once again to you all.